The tutorial, I'd like to talk quickly about the VR mode and the not VR mode. As you know, in Unreal Engine 5, if you do turn on the plugins, so for example here, if I type VR, you are able to activate the VR plugin. I'm using the Focus 3, so I check the Steam VR to make sure this is on. Then when you restart the project, you should have this option called VR Preview, and then you can play. And you should be able to see the environment through the VR headset. Right? Everything looks fine, all the shaders, all the reflections, but I just want to highlight this is actually not exactly the same rendering when you package the project. So for instance, you can already see there's a slightly difference between this VR mode compared to the actual screen-based rendering. If I switch back to the screen-based rendering, the quality is a little bit better because it's using global illumination, it's using the lumens, all the high-end post effects like a bloom, right? But in VR, you kind of have issues to run this really high-end rendering feature. So I want to just highlight, even you switch to the VR preview here, this is not exactly the same look when you package the file. Here I like to explain a little bit why. In the project settings, if you really look into, there is a category called engine and then rendering. Right? This is the place you have these all high-end rendering features available for desktop, PC-based rendering. For example, in this case, I'm using the anti-aliasing FXAA, and also I'm using a very uh, latest feature of Lumen for global illumination to render reflections, right, with a super high resolution. And also I have the ray tracing turned on. I have the real-time reflections turned on. So all of these nice features, they looks pretty cool, but this will give you some trouble when you play because all of this is not optimized. Okay, and another really important feature in this category, if you go all the way down, I think there's a category called VR optimization. Uh, Let me see. Yeah, so MSAA is the one you should use. But also, there's a bloom. This will causing some issues. There's a motion blur. You probably don't want to have it. All right. So there's hundreds of features here available. The question is how we can optimize those features to make it suitable for VR rendering, right? So in the VR category, for example, you have the mobile HDR. This is definitely going to cause you trouble. You probably want to turn on the instance stereo. So the question is how we know what is the best option, right, to set up these rendering features. So here's a suggestion. If you create a new project using the default Unreal Engine 5 VR template, this project setting is actually pretty much optimized for the VR. So if you really go to the engine, go to the rendering, you just follow exactly the same settings as here to your new project, you should be okay. So for instance, here you can see the anti-aliasing is now set up as MSAA. It's much cheaper than the default. And also, if you go all the way down, you can see there's the features like bloom being turned off. There's features like a retrace shadows is all turned off. There's other features such as HDR mobile has been turned off. Instead, you have the multi-view turned on, right? You have the instance stereo being turned on. So make sure you follow exactly this setting. Also, I believe the lumen is turned off in this case, so there's no lumen for reflections for retracing. Okay, so this is a solution to make our thing optimal. This is a quick demo. I want to show you when you compile the Unreal package into a standalone app, what the performance looks like if you didn't using the correct settings in VR. So first, I will show you a project compiled using Lumen, as well as high-end reflections in Unreal Engine 5. So as you can see, this looks really nice in a screen-based rendering. You have these reflections on the ground. You have these animated characters. The frame rate is really high. However, if I kick into VR, I just type stereo on, and have this VR headset right now connected to the app. So you should be able to see. Close this. It's actually crashed. Okay. Well, let's try this again. Okay, so this looks pretty nice in a screen-based. But if I type stereo on in the VR mode, you can tell the resolution, the frame rate, and also the shader looks pretty bad. If I look around, you see the frame rate is very low. Right. The reason is in that project setting, I use Lumen, I use global illumination, I have reflections on. It's not really optimized for the VR mode. You see the frame rate color looks really different. So let me exit this one. And I will show you another similar project. It also didn't optimize. We use the default Unreal Engine 5 Lumen global illumination as well as reflections. Right? So it looks all right with the screen-based for sure. It's loading. Okay, so you have this highly reflective fog environment, bloom, post effects, and also the real-time reflections. All looks pretty nice. But if I really kick in the VR stereo on, you will see the performance gonna suffer, and the material looks pretty awful, right? If I move my headset a little bit, you can see the color just looks right. Again, this is the same problem because we did not optimize this based on the VR rendering mode. Okay, so I will exit. And then I will show you an optimized packaged profile. This is a D6. This is actually from my early demo. You can see this one I already convert all the shaders based on the VR optimization. So here you can see it looks not as reflective. It doesn't have a global illumination, but it looks pretty consistent. Right. So now if I turn on stereo on in the VR headset, you see this is very consistent. Right. You have exactly this this type of rendering. It doesn't really have a different visual impact. Okay. So I think that's something I like to show you is with the correct optimization, the VR mode will look consistent from the screen-based mode. Right. So this is the VR mode. You see the color looks really consistent. Even if I go to the animated holographic image, you still see that it looks pretty consistent. Okay, so I will do a little bit of recording using this headset, and then you are able to see this directly. So now I'm going to move a little bit. I can also use my joystick. So here I'm going to move. And I can go here. You see the robot does not have a reflection, but it's okay. It still looks very metal, right? Polished. Here. And also I can see the animated cat. And I can go here. I can jump on top of this object. All right. So the performance is very, very consistent with the VR. All right, let's take off the VR headset and I will stereo off. So go back to the screen based, right? This is very consistent. And then I will exit.